World War II was a conflict that saw fighting all over the globe, from the Pacific to Europe to Africa. Millions of people were killed, and some of the secrets of World War II are still buried to this day. But over recent decades, some incredible discoveries have been made. You won't believe some of these stories, so buckle up and get ready. The Adriatic Sea Bombers. Located in the Mediterranean between Italy and Croatia, the Adriatic Sea is a burial ground that's home to 5 B-24 Liberator bombers. The planes were all presumed lost during World War II. It was about a half a century later in 2002 when it was reported that the missing US bomber planes were finally discovered in the Adriatic Sea. The B-24 Liberator was a heavy bomber that could hold a max of 10 men. The bombers could reach speeds of up to 297 miles per hour and were equipped to hold up to 5,000 pounds of bombs. These were the most produced heavy bombers made for the war, and they played a critical role in bombing German targets. But the crew of the B-24s referred to as the plane as the Flying Coffin because of its singular entry point located at the rear of the plane. This was the only exit available in an emergency, and crews claimed it was almost impossible to escape the B-24 in dangerous situations. The missing bombers spotted in the Adriatic Sea were more than likely stationed at a base not too far away in Foggia, Italy. We really don't know much about the mission they were on when they disappeared. Also, we don't have any reliable information about the crew that were on the planes when they went down during their final operation. A research team from the University of Delaware and the Pentagon worked together diligently to find the missing B-24s. Joining the mission was a group of experienced researchers and divers from Croatia. With their help, unmanned vehicles were sent underwater to explore 24 square miles in the Adriatic for the wreckage of the B-24 bombers. After a few weeks of searching, 3 of the planes were located. Researchers were able to get the plane numbers off the wreckage in order to identify them as the missing B-24 Liberator bombers. The 5 planes had around 23 men on board when they went missing. The soldiers had been listed as missing in action for over 80 years. This isn't the only discovery that could possibly be made in the Adriatic either. It's believed that some other planes, possibly more B-24s, also crashed into the Adriatic and were never found. A mission leader involved in the Adriatic Sea search was the co-founder of Project Recover. This is an organization dedicated to finding and repatriating the 80,000 missing US servicemen that were listed as missing for conflicts dating all the way back to World War II. The Adriatic Sea discovery of the B-24 Liberator bombers was one of the biggest finds made by Project Recover. Lost artwork. During World War II, Nazi Germany looted the European continent and confiscated about 650,000 pieces of artwork. They were taken from museums, art galleries, and even private residences. The artwork was typically stolen from Jewish citizens. This also included the looting of personal belongings. Sadly, some of these precious pieces were never found or saved. Some were destroyed during bombings, while others were simply lost and forgotten. A few of the works came from some very notable artists like Raphael, Vincent van Gogh, and Rembrandt. To this day, some valuable and famous pieces of art are still missing from the catalogs. So why did the Germans decide to steal a bunch of art? The plan was to create the Führer Museum in Adolf Hitler's Austrian hometown. Some of the pieces would be placed on exhibit, but not every piece of artwork was stolen for this plan. Pieces were deemed degenerate and were sent to be destroyed. This even included books, Torahs, or the Hebrew Bible, and various important cultural documents. Some were destroyed, but others were set aside for another day, possibly by Germans looking to build their own collection or to find a way to make money on the black market. Others just disobeyed orders because they couldn't bring themselves to destroy items of such importance. The United States learned of the German looting and decided to create the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives Program, or MFAA. The MFAA was built on both male and female scholars, architects, museum curators, and more from 14 different nations. Their mission was to save pieces of artwork, artifacts, and other significant items taken by Nazi Germany. They were even sent into some combat situations, and sadly, 2 members of the MFAA were killed during the conflict. Salzwelten-Altaussee was an Austrian salt mine that was home to about 8,000 stolen items by the Nazis. The mine was a perfect spot for hiding stolen art since it was 2,600 feet below ground and had a maze of tunnels. This was a safe location fortified against bombing, plus the mine had a cool temperature, which kept everything properly stored. The MFAA eventually learned of this location, and when they arrived, they discovered that the entrance to the mine had been blasted by explosives. They had to dig through the rubble to get to the items stored inside the mine. An Atlas Obscura article detailed what was saved by the MFAA. By July 1945, it was reported that 6,577 paintings, 230 drawings and watercolors, 954 prints, 137 sculptures, and 129 pieces of arms and armor had been removed from the mine. The success of the MFAA was incredibly impressive. They saved 5 million items from being lost forever. The pieces were later returned to their rightful collectors. This is simply amazing considering the MFAA was given a shoestring budget, plus they even went to the front lines of battle to save some items from destruction. But that's not the end of the stolen artwork story. More discoveries were made long after the MFAA was formed. It was September 2010 when a train traveled from Switzerland to Germany. A German customs officer did a check of the passengers on board and met an odd but nervous man on the train. The man was named Rolf Nicholas Cornelius Gerlit, and the officer decided to detain him due to his unusual behavior when questioned about the purpose of his trip from Switzerland to Germany. Gerlit admitted that he was visiting an art gallery. Rolf Nicholas Cornelius Gerlit was also searched by the customs officer, and it was discovered that he was traveling with 12,000 in euros. The customs officer immediately flagged Gerlit in the system, and from there, a dark secret was uncovered. Gerlit was actually the son of Hildebrand Gerlit, a man who was the curator of the artwork stolen by the Nazis during World War II. Authorities decided to look into Rolf Nicholas and realized that he was living in a small, modest apartment in Munich, Germany. Something else caught their attention that day too. Gerlit was under suspicion for tax evasion. 1 year after the train incident, a search warrant was obtained for the man's home, but something strange happened. Authorities simply decided not to do anything. While law enforcement did nothing, Gerlit sold a painting called The Lion Tamer by Max Beckmann for over $1 million. The money was split between the descendants of Alfred Fletchheim. A bit of investigating led to the discovery that Alfred Fletchheim sold the Lion Tamer to Gerlit's father during the 1930s. It's believed that this may have been a sale where Fletchheim had no other choice. Fletchheim was Jewish, and the Nazis were notorious for stealing art and other items from Jewish families all over Europe. If Gerlit had one painting to sell, then there could be many more inside of his apartment. A search warrant was finally executed in early 2012. What they found was unbelievable. In Gerlit's apartment were 1,400 framed and unframed works of art from artists like Picasso, Matisse, and Renoir. All of the artwork was stacked in a huge, disorganized pile. Also, the home was filled with cans of expired food and the balcony door was blocked off. The artwork was quickly confiscated and hauled away to a facility. Some Jewish families in Germany asked if the origins of the artwork could be determined. This meant that there would have to be an investigation into the history of the ownership of some pieces due to the looting that took place in the 1930s. Laws in Germany are confusing and complicated when it comes to this matter. Compliance is voluntary, and there is a 30-year statute of limitations when it comes to situations like this. At the time of this video, Gerlit was not charged with a crime, and his artwork is still in a warehouse while the status of these works is unknown. What are your thoughts on the looted artwork that was taken during World War II? Let us know in the comments below, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. The mass graves. In 2022, Polish investigators made a horrific discovery in the Białudi Forest. About 100 miles north of Warsaw, the investigators found 2 mass graves that held an astonishing 17 tons of ashes from World War II. In total, around 8,000 Poles were executed by the Nazis between 1940 and 1944. Those who died were prisoners of the Soldau Nazi German prisoner camp, which was near the town of Zaldło. The camp held 30,000 people that were mainly Jewish citizens, Polish elites, or resistance fighters. Investigators were shocked once they realized that those that were executed were cremated. After this, their remains were pulverized into ash. The ash was then buried in 2 pits that were about 10 feet deep. A Apparently, the Germans planted trees on top of the pits to try and hide the mass grave. Polish authorities would have pursued criminal charges if anyone who worked as prison guards at the camp decades ago were still alive. A symbolic grave was recently placed on the site, and a memorial service was held in honor to the fallen victims. Sadly, another mass grave was discovered in 2009 in northern Poland. Construction workers from the town of Malbork were laying down a foundation for a new hotel when they spotted human remains peeking out of the dirt. The bodies were exhumed and the initial count was set at 60 people. The manner in which the bodies were buried stunned officials. One of them stated, "These peoples were buried in an appalling and inhuman manner." When the work was finished, there were 1,800 to 2,000 total remains discovered, including those of small children. Malbork saw fierce fighting back in 1945 as German soldiers retreated from the area and Soviet soldiers advanced further inside. There were German citizens living in the region as well during that time. What frustrated investigators and officials was that nothing was buried with the people, like personal belongings or identification. At the time of the making of this video, no updates have been given concerning the victims. Germans were living in Malbork, and it is possible that they were executed by the Soviet military when they entered the town. There's been an attempt to locate eyewitnesses to the horrific event, but no one fitting the description has come forward or been located. But those that were exhumed were finally given proper burials. An official added, "We are looking for witnesses or sources of information. We hope to find some leads because we still know virtually nothing about the mass grave and the victims." Another mass grave was uncovered in Brest, Belarus in 2019. Construction workers there unearthed the remains of 1,200 people who were Jewish citizens. The victims were forced to live in the city's ghetto from 1941 until 1942. Brest was a part of Poland at one point, but is now part of Belarus. It was an area occupied by Germany during World War II. This is unfortunately yet another discovery linked to the horrors of the Holocaust. Sadly, the victims in this case also included women and children who were brutally executed by the Nazis. While the grave was discovered in 2019, it was reported that a Brest newspaper reported that a mass grave was in their town about 20 years prior. The citizens may not have known the exact location of the grave or the number of people that were buried inside, though. A public funeral ceremony was held for those who were exhumed, and a large portion of the local community attended. The Israeli ambassador to Belarus was also in attendance that day to pay their respects. The USS Johnston. The deepest shipwreck of a World War II vessel was located in 2019. The USS Johnston, a U.S. Fletcher-class destroyer that was built in Seattle back in 1942, was spotted in the Pacific Ocean. It sank during a battle with the Japanese fleet in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. This battle happened in 1944 when the Allied forces were busy liberating the Philippines from Japanese control. The USS Johnston was one boat in a small fleet of ships that were positioned in Leyte Gulf outside of the Philippines. Their job was to protect U.S. troops landing in the country. Without ships like the USS Johnston to protect the troops, they would have been easy targets for the enemy fleet. The Johnston and the other ships were eventually attacked by a much larger Japanese fleet. In that Japanese fleet was the famed Yamato, a ship that was one of the deadliest, most heavily armored, and largest vessels of its time. The Johnston and its fellow ships faced 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers in the battle. The Johnston and the other U.S. vessels in the Leyte Gulf were hopelessly outgunned, but that didn't stop them from standing up to the Japanese. In the end, the USS Johnston was sunk, but it is remembered as a ship that fought bravely on the seas in an epic battle with the Japanese. In the end, the US and their allies defeated the Japanese forces in World War II, taking another step closer to victory. Interestingly enough, the Battle of Leyte Gulf was the last major naval battle of the war. But the story of the Johnston intrigued some people enough to search for the remains of the ship underwater. When it was finally located, the USS Johnston was about 4 miles under the ocean, making it the deepest shipwreck from World War II that's ever been discovered. What amazing stories from World War II would you like us to cover in upcoming episodes? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.